Hey guys, and welcome back to a brand new video. Today, we're gonna be diving into Lightroom Classic, and I'm gonna be walking you through exactly how I get this classic teal and orange color grade on my photos inside of Lightroom and how you can do it too. So without further ado, and without wasting any more time, let's dive into the laptop. Let's get Lightroom booted up, and let's get this video started. All right, so here we are inside of Lightroom Classic, and we've got our photo already opened up, and we're already over in the Develop tab. Now, this photo was shot in Egypt at sunset on the Nile River, which is pretty cool. I absolutely loved my time in Egypt, and I had an absolute blast out there shooting all kinds of scenes. But anyway, let's dive into our edit. So we're gonna first start off with our basic tab over here, where we're not really gonna be dialing in the orange and teal color grade in the basic tab. This is gonna be more reserved for the HSL sliders, the color grading, and the camera calibration at the bottom, but I am going to be walking you through a complete step-by-step process of how I edit my photos, because why not? Doesn't take that long. Anyway, let's dive in. So first things first, we're going to increase the shadows ever so slightly. We're also going to add just a little bit of contrast, and we're going to bring down the highlights a touch as well. We're then going to dive into presence here, and I'm going to just drop the clarity just a little bit and the texture a little bit as well. I find that this kind of softens the edges very nicely, so I'm a huge fan of doing this. And then I'm going to leave vibrance and saturation as is, and this is pretty much my basic panel taken care of. The white balance, more or less in my eyes, looks fairly good on screen, so I'm happy to leave it as is. All right, moving now down into the tone curve. We're just going to be putting quite a simple S curve on this, as I just want to add back a little bit of contrast and punch in those midtones. We might leave the highlights up here for where they are at the moment. Might just drop these shadows a little bit. So if we have a look at it before and an after, not too much has changed, but these are just the basic first little building blocks and steps it takes to then begin the color grade. And just quickly, if you want to save the hassle and headache of editing photos completely from scratch by yourself every time, you can go down into the description and check the first link where my master collection of Lightroom presets can be found. You can also use this discount code at checkout if you want to go and pick them up. It'll be a cheeky little discount for you, and they do save me a stack of time. Obviously, I'm not using them here, of course, because that wouldn't really show you anything. But anyway, just wanted to let you know about them. I use them on all my shots, and yeah, they get me the looks that I love and use everywhere. Anyway, back on with the video. Okay, so the tone curve is now complete, more or less. It's a very basic curve. We're not looking to do too much with it here. A lot of this photo is going to be dialed in, like I said, with the HSL sliders, the color grading, the camera calibration, and masking as well. We're going to be adding a little bit of a masking flare in here too. Okay, so the first thing I'm noticing is I didn't shoot this too far into golden hour, so this is still quite yellow. So the first thing I'm going to do is come over to the yellows and move them into the orange section just a little bit. I'm going to do the same thing with the oranges, move them left just a touch to kind of push them into that red zone. And now you can see if we turn this off and back on, we're getting a little bit more of an orange vibe, especially in the sky. Now we're going to leave the greens as is, the reds as is, the aquas we're just going to move over to the blue section a little bit, and the blue section we're going to move over to the teals just a little bit. Now I know it looks super faint right now, especially because the sky is so blown out and bright, but we are already baking our orange and teal look into our photo purely just from the hue sliders. And this is because we're turning the yellows into a little bit more orange, and we're turning the blues into a little bit more teal. So this is definitely a key factor to when you're looking to get that orange and teal look in your photos. Okay, moving now into saturation, we're going to increase our orange saturation a little bit, and we're also going to increase our blue saturation just a touch. We're going to leave yellows, or maybe just drop them ever so slightly, and then I'm pretty much done here. Apart from desaturating the purples and magentas, to my eye, I can't see any purples or magentas in this shot, but just in case there are some rogue purples or magentas in somewhere in the shadows or in the back somewhere, I want to make sure I kill them off almost completely. So now we're into the last part of the HSL tab, the luminance side of things, and we're just going to drop the blue luminance a touch. This just makes the sky a little bit darker, but you can only really see it in this corner here because at the moment, this is just super bright. And that's pretty much it. Now, to make sure we get a good rough idea of what we're doing with our color grading and camera calibration a little later on, I'm just going to quickly dive into our masking tab. This here, I'm just going to select the masking tab, and then I'm going to click sky. I'm then going to let AI work its magic, and we're just going to drop the exposure of the sky a little bit to bring back a whole load of detail. Of course, I don't want to make it look fake, but I also want to make sure I've got that teal aspect in my photos and especially in the sky. So we might have dropped the exposure just a little bit too much here. That is looking fairly good the way I see it now. And we're probably going to leave it as is. We are then going to just add another linear gradient to the bottom here because it's probably a little bit overexposed, the entire photo. There we go. This is now looking very nice. So we're going to drop the exposure of the foreground there. And we also might look at pushing a little bit of blue into there as well, just by adjusting the temperature. Okay, so now we've got a little bit more of an evenly based photo, if you will. And maybe even we could look at touching the exposure just a slight amount. This is going to be a whole lot easier to color grade. So let's dive into our color grading section here, where we are going to be pushing some blue into our shadows. So we're just going to increase that a little bit more to the teal side. So we don't want it all the way down here. That's a little bit too purple for my liking. We want it in between green and blue, which is where that teal sits. And we're going to just saturate it a little bit there. It looks good to me. And then the midtones is where we're going to push our oranges. So just like that, nothing too crazy. We might make this a little bit more red and move that along the line a little bit, increase the saturation, do the same thing here. We don't want it too harsh. We don't want to push it so far that it just looks really unnatural. That's far from ideal. But I think as things are looking right now, they are looking good. Now I'm going to do something a little bit controversial. Usually people push orange into the midtones, which is definitely something we could do, but hear me out. We could also push a little bit of blue into our into our highlights, I should say. We're working with the highlights here. Into our highlights, just a touch to kind of help up here look a little bit more blue. And something I've just noticed is we might have a little bit of rogue green up here. So I'm gonna desaturate the greens and I'm gonna desaturate the aquas as well, hopefully clearing that out. To be honest, it still looks a little green up there. We might fix that up with masking. But as you can see now, our color grading workflow is completely done, more or less. It's a subtle change for sure, but I definitely like the changes that we have made here. Okay, now we're gonna skip over detail as I'm not looking to sharpen and I don't need to denoise my photo whatsoever. We only shot this at 400 ISO, so no stress at all. And then our lens correction is already set up. Transform, I'm happy with. Actually, we might adjust the crop just a little bit, make sure that horizon is straight. And we also might crop this for Instagram and just remove that rope at the bottom there. Actually, no, I kind of like the rope at the bottom. All right, we're gonna leave it as is. I'm happy. Okay, we're gonna leave lens blur as is as well. And now we are into camera calibration. So this is another place where you'll really be able to sell that orange and teal look hard in your photos. The biggest place where you'll be able to do that is in the blue primary. If I just move the blue primary all the way over to the left, you can see we're very orange and teal here. And if I go all the way over to the right, we're more of a vomit yellow and purple. Far from ideal. So we obviously want to move this slider to the left. And what the camera calibration does is it pretty much tells Lightroom, okay, this is what blue looks like. You're changing how Lightroom perceives your color out of your camera because of course this is baked into your camera's color science. And now we get to slightly alter that a little bit. And that's exactly what we're doing here, okay? So we're gonna make sure that Lightroom thinks our blues are a little bit more teal and therefore it also adjusts how the oranges and yellows are perceived in our shot as well. So we're just gonna move this to the left-hand side a little bit. We are then gonna increase the saturation as we want those blues to be a little richer. And then we're gonna do the same thing here with the green primary. We're gonna move it left, okay, we get this result. We're gonna move it right, okay, we get this result. This way just makes it a little bit more orange and tealy. I'm happy with that. We're gonna move it this way, desaturated, this way saturated. I'm definitely gonna saturate that. And we're gonna do the same thing here. Red primary, okay, we're gonna move it to the left ever so slightly, and then left, right. Okay, we're gonna increase the saturation there as well. And then we can have a look here. If this makes a bit of a difference, which it does, we're gonna just move this onto our purple side ever so slightly. And then if I turn this off and back on, we're just subtly adding changes, but when the changes all stack on top of each other and compound, you start to get some really interesting color grades. So that is pretty much all the Lightroom settings that we can change. Now we get to dive into the masking. Now, also, I just wanna let you know, if you nailed the exposure out of your shot, chances are you'd be pretty much done here at this point, but masking is always something good to be able to do. Make sure that the light looks absolutely perfect. And I didn't nail the exposure here. So now I've got the pleasurable job of making sure and correcting my exposure to make sure it's all good. So the first thing I want to do is add a linear gradient over here. And we're just going to decrease the exposure a little bit. Now I also said before, we're gonna add a radial gradient here. Sorry if I'm gonna power through this. I usually just decimate the mask masking tab inside of Lightroom. But I did say there was a little bit of green up in this area here. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna press O, and that's then gonna hide our little masking mask, if you will, our masking overlay, I should say. And we're just gonna drop the temperature a little bit here, and we're gonna increase the tint over to the purple side, and that should remove any green sort of glow in our shot up here. Okay, things are now looking good. I'm then gonna come in here just to make sure the sky is looking really good. I'm creating another radial mask, and I'm just gonna move this a little bit more to the bottom side of the image. I'm gonna come back up here, hit invert, and now I'm selecting the outside of that. So this is where we're gonna add our vignette, and we're just gonna drop that just like that. And now our sky is looking much nicer. Okay, we're then gonna come in here and add a linear gradient. This is what we already did before to just kind of correct our exposure, but I wanna do it a little bit more as well. We're gonna drop our exposure here just a touch, and this really starts to show all the blue parts in the water and how nicely they contrast with all the orange parts reflecting from the sky. So I'm very happy with how this is looking so far. We're then gonna come in here and add another linear gradient over to the side now, and we're just gonna come here and drop the exposure. Now what this is aiming to do is kind of sell the idea that all the light, which it is, coming from the left-hand side, and we're gonna emphasize that in just a moment, but that's why we wanna just slightly darken the right-hand side of the image. Like I said, I know a lot of these changes are small and subtle, but when they compound and stack up on top of each other, that's where the magic is made. All right, so now we're gonna add our final, doubt it's our final, but I'm gonna call it my final mask here. And we're just gonna increase our exposure just a little bit like that. And then what I might do, it's never the last one. What I might do here is then I'm gonna come in here, which is where the light is coming from, but it's also arguably where the sky is brightest. Press O to hide that masking overlay, I should say. And then we're gonna just drop the highlights a little bit and add a little bit of warmth in there, just to sell that look ever so slightly. And now we've got before and after. I don't know what's going on with that crop there, but either way, this is what we're done with. This is what we're left with. I'm gonna put a before and after on screen now, just so you can get a reasonable look at our before and after. And you've also got a complete breakdown of the settings I've just tweaked over on Lightroom and exactly why I've tweaked those settings. But guys, this pretty much wraps up our video today. It's actually not that hard to achieve this look. Of course, you wanna make sure the colors make sense. You know, if you're in a dense jungle rainforest where everything's green, maybe the teal on orange look isn't gonna look as nice as you might think it will. Sure, you might be able to pull it off, and hats off if you can. But to be honest with you, you do wanna make sure the environment makes sense that you're in. So just keep that in mind. But anyway, guys, that's gonna wrap up today's video. If you have enjoyed, let me know in the comments down below. If you're new around here, subscribe would mean the absolute world. And if you wanted to go check out those Lightroom presets, link down below, the master collection that I've got, you can do so. First link, use this code at checkout. And guys, as always, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.